here. It's one of life's great mysteries, isn't it?
What happens when you take the most parasocial elements of anime culture and combine it with daily routine behaviors, gambling, and sunk cost fallacy? You are left with what is known today as the gacha industry. A fat red ruby that's seen money come in droves from those whose value judgments have gone out the window when just the right character presents themselves, be it for meta or personal attachment. When so much investment is on the line for a product with a planned obsolescence, it instinctively creates a self-preservation mentality, as everyone around the game is compelled to sell everyone on their best, in quotations, game over someone else's. And while I can make the practice of tribalism a video of its own at possibly triple the video length, I came here to focus on something else. Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero are the two youngest of the gacha games that represent the big four in the space, and popularity-wise are the closest between each other over the gargantuan breakthrough success of Genshin Impact and the refined, tried-and-true runner-up of Honkai Star Rail. Yet despite this sort of camaraderie of being wet behind the ears and looking to make a name for themselves, their respective communities just can't seem to stop tearing each other apart as tensions continue to rise from problems inside and outside of their games. Today, I want to talk about why this feud between these two games is just about the most pointless waste of energy I have seen lately when it comes to the gift that keeps on giving, that is gacha tribalism. Genshin Impact, in its earlier years, despite its massive success, spent its first few years quickly amassing a loud group of players who felt dissatisfied and neglected by Hoyo Vs' unwillingness to update the game with features and content that would satisfy the capital G gamer crowd. The common counterpoint made by those content with Genshin's offerings was to remind players that they were playing a gacha game and that expectations needed to be tempered and other aspects of the game should be focused on and enjoyed over others. What these players fail to recognize is that Genshin Impact's mainstream success was a direct result of Hoyo taking the first steps to push the boundaries of the gacha industry in the first place, and create something closer to an actual retail-released game. The 3D character models, the open world, the refined combat experience, all were things absent or underdeveloped in an overwhelming majority of gacha games that came before it. This lack of combat-focused content, quality of life, and community feedback implemented into the game would result in massive amounts of players regularly abandoning the game in favor of returning to traditional video games or biding their time for competition to come Genshin's way in hopes of some change. Tower of Fantasy was the first challenger in this regard and likely saw a sizable amount of players coming in solely to try to stick it to the man that is Hoyoverse. However, Tower of Fantasy's time in the spotlight was incredibly short-lived, as spite cannot fuel the success of a gacha game alone, and the game itself was severely lacking in several areas which prevented it from standing up on its own two legs. Gameplay, story, quality of life, polish, value proposition, the list went on and on. However, if one thing was for certain, it was that if a competitor could make a game at even a fraction of the scale and quality of Genshin Impact, you could make it big time. Sometime later, we saw the release of Honkai Star Rail, and despite it being made by the exact same company, players would still champion it as the superior experience with an actual pulse on the community, despite their credit card swipes all going back into the very same pocket. And look where that's got you now, lads. But now, we come to Wuthering Waves, the first true competition for Hoyoverse and a proper champion to which the hardcore ex-Genshin players could place their faith into and deliver the much-needed spanking the mint-picking simulator was long overdue for. More than 6 months later when they got their shit together. At every step of the way, extremist Hoyoverse fans were attempting to bury Wuwa and never let it see the light of day, with the intent to keep their favorite gacha from ever feeling threatened. However, with the release of 2.0 and Renacida, the game's quality spoke for itself, and all it took was for someone to get a taste of what the Land of Echoes had to offer to know which side of the fence they'd choose to land on. Yet despite all this positive reception, Kuro's darling child remains too small of a voice in the gacha space to take bites out of its true competition. However, that hasn't stopped them from taking bites out of someone else entirely. Zenless Zone Zero. Releasing a little over a month after Wuthering Waves made it a prime target for extremists in the Wuwa crowd. As Hoyo's newest IP, it was ripe for an opportunity to go on the offensive, especially since ZZZ itself was struggling to find its own footing right out of the gate and arguably to this very day. In more recent weeks, tensions between the two have been rising dramatically as Wuthering Waves has recently suffered a massive backlash following their first anniversary, coming from both bad actors trying to push a Hoyoverse agenda and those caught in the crossfire who simply shared similar sentiments the Brigaders had latched onto, resulting in the hardcore Wuwa crowd to employ a shoot first, ask questions later approach to handling the backlash. On the other end of the spectrum, Zenless Zone Zero was facing a continual decline in mainstream appeal, resulting in the removal of foundational gameplay systems, balance changes, and overhauls to existing mechanics in an attempt to turn the ship back on course. This open display of vulnerability on both sides led to a series of skirmishes between both groups as they fought to preserve the image of their respective game. But what if I were to tell you all of this is just a pointless battle for a perceived gain that neither gacha would see the true value of? Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero as video games offer completely different experiences to each other and quite frankly have no reason to be at each other's throats all the time. Wuthering Waves' feud with Hoyoverse is more accurately targeted at Genshin Impact and its respective community, not Zenless Zone Zero or even Honkai Star Rail. Those saying that this is a battle between Hoyo versus Kuro and therefore it doesn't matter which game they target is ignorant to say. My case in point? The Genshin could never meme. Genshin could never was a popular phrase that emerged from Honkai Star Rail following the announcement of the free 5-star character Dr. Ratio being rewarded to all players for the duration of the 1.6 version and lasting until version 2.1. Despite both games belonging to Hoyoverse, the hardcore Honkai Star Rail community would frequently take opportunities to take shots at their big brother whenever it was appropriate to them. ZZZ even had their own variation of it following the free release of Haramasa, though to a much lesser response, as Haramasa did not have the same widespread appeal and meta strength as Dr. Ratio. With this in mind, the Wuwa community taking shots at ZZZ is a borderline misfire, and their attempts should be directed at the very game they abandoned in favor of their current one. As for Zenless Zone Zero, their hostility towards Wuthering Waves is a misguided act of self-defense to preserve their smaller hold in the gacha industry. This does not justify their behavior, but it does help to contextualize the misplaced nature of their actions, akin to a cornered animal in need of a way out no matter the cost. Beyond both games' misplaced hostilities, comparing the two all the time makes no sense whatsoever, as both games only share a single similarity of being a real-time action game, and that is it. An open world does not make Wuthering Waves better if a player does not like open world games, or does not like how gacha games implement, or in some cases, butcher, open world design. A harder combat system does not make Zenless Zone Zero better if players aren't looking for intense moments of heightened reflexes from their casual gacha game. A better anniversary does not matter if someone only plays one game and has no intention of playing the other. A better gear system does not matter if both games still have too many points of failure in their respective systems that are only partially alleviated by their own implementations. So on and so forth. I believe you get where I'm going with this. Wuthering Waves has a direct competitor and should not be taking shots at a third party. On the other end, Zenless Zone Zero needs to focus on improving itself while it does not have a direct competitor at this very moment. These are both great games by all accounts and should be recognized for their achievements. They do not need to be tearing each other down, as they have nothing to gain from each other as they appeal to completely different audiences. Gameplay, story, art style, setting, It's all too different from each other to put a stamp of objectivity over one and leave the other one out to dry. I doubt I could really convince a significant number of people to drop their flags and to focus on improving themselves over tearing each other down, but I hope my video can provide some sense of sanity amidst all the madness. Okay, now that that's over, I guess it's time to wrap up the Ah, shit. There's a Saintontas chapter. Okay, I have no intention of picking a side on this one. Does that make me a fence-sitter? Yes. But maybe if both sides didn't act in ways I don't agree with, then maybe I wouldn't be on this fence, yeah? To address the ZZZ crowd acting in defense to Saintontas' content farming of the situation, you cannot respond back to his opinions by drawing direct comparisons of Zenless Zone Zero to Wuthering Waves. It's just not a favorable comparison. Wuwa has no tangible HP inflation, no 75-25 weapon banner systems, and Kuro themselves do not have a history of behavior with screwing over their player base, not in the same way Hoyoverse has. ZZZ may emphasize that they are a separate team from Hoyoverse, but unfortunately, words alone cannot absolve them completely of the company's actions as a whole, especially when they themselves have already fallen into the same traps as Hoyo made in the past. If you continue to fail to understand this golden rule of an engagement with Saintontas, he will continue to farm and label you under the extremist crowd of ZZZ and continue to further damage the reputation of the wider ZZZ community. As for Saintontas, I believe I have already made my case in a general sense in my first ever video. I like watching you, you're a great content creator, but you can also be a real asshole to people. To quickly go over the Wuwa anniversary for a second, even if you and I both understand that the 12 banner system will not have an effect on the rerun schedule as a whole and is more of an abnormality, it is not unreasonable to expect people to not like the feeling of having to skip a character they want because they can't afford to. Banner systems as a whole are already designed to pressure people with FOMO, and just because you throw a pseudo freebie at them won't make them suddenly change their perspective on the matter if they are feeling pressured. You may think it's an unfair conclusion I am making, but gacha games themselves are already plenty unfair. As for your opinions of the anniversary rewards for ZZZ compared to Wuwa, it's obvious which one is the true winner. Wuwa. However, like I've said before with your approach to escalating situations when it's absolutely unnecessary, spinning the L and Joe buffs as some opening of Pandora's box instead of taking at face value comes off as uncalled for, pessimistic behavior. I genuinely believe that the biggest contributing factor to why you receive a lot of hate on the regular is that you are the only content creator in this space at your level of popularity that still plays and covers all of the big four gachas despite clearly only ever enjoying playing Wuthering Waves. Most all other big-name CCs, like Tectone or Gacha Smack, have made the decision to just not cover these games anymore and move on. So when you opt to still play all four of them, it comes off as stirring the pot for views and analytics to everyone else. I am not going to tell you what games you can and cannot play, though my statement above might seem contradictory in that sense, but I would like to at least provide perspective on why you are perceived as a drama farmer all the time. Though I have a feeling you're already aware of this anyway. I'm sure there is more I can talk about with this subject matter, but this is already quite the long video, so I will be wrapping up now. And with that, I have said all I really wanted to about the clash of communities between Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero. Me personally, my bias lies with ZZZ, as I do not personally enjoy open world games as I once used to, and ZZZ's art style is more to my tastes. That does not mean I don't enjoy playing Wuthering Waves. I think it's also a great game, but for different reasons, and I have my own preferences. I hope that in a couple months' time, when both games' respective anniversary events conclude, that we can turn the heat down on these conversations and go back to where we were before. Quite frankly, it's tiresome enough as is, and I don't know how these people can keep doing it. If I ever one day add live streaming to my content catalog, then I hope I won't find myself stun-locked for 3 entire hours getting in fights with same-day followed chatters and elitist troublemakers. But until then, this was quite the video, and I'm clocking out.